So I'm Chris Reiter. I'm a solution architect here at Qlik. I'm going to be doing the demo today. So I always plan for a large audience, but I love it when we have a small, intimate audience because that lets me, honestly, I love adjusting on the fly. I try not to do it too much just for sake of overall content, but I'll cautiously say if there's something that really jumps out to you guys as we're going through and you have that burning need to ask, I won't stop you. Otherwise, I'll try to leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A. And I'm going to try and cover a lot today. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. Share screen 2. Okay, so can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to start out. I'm not going to kill you with slides, but, and I know, you have at least some familiarity with the product, or at least the company. So I'm going to cover just a little bit about our mission and just a little bit of high level. I promise it's not going to be too much. But overall agenda, I'm going to start out with that initial brief overview. And then because this is big data related, I felt the need to pull out some of our big data use cases. So in the middle, I'm going to cover what we call on-demand app generation and another technology called dynamic views. And then at the end, I'll try and reserve a few minutes for Q&A. So you should get a pretty good overall idea of where Qlik fits and how it can solve a lot of your different use cases. So what does Qlik do? I mean, this is our forte. We're all about helping you leverage the data that you have. I mean, the reality is, most organizations use about 10% of their data. It's hard enough to get your data, just get your data, just get it into a form where you can access it, much less actually take that data that now you've wrangled together and make sense out of it. So that's where we hope to fill in those gaps. And we do that by offering, 3 main components of our company. One of them is our data integration component. That's all about data movement, data capture, data warehouse automation. And then the one that we're going to focus on today primarily is our data analytics. And then also we have this third pillar or third leg of the stool, which is our data literacy as a service. So even if you manage to get the data, even if you manage to put it in a data analytics tool and be able to do something with it, is there the ability to understand what people are looking at? So that's really what data literacy is all about, helping people understand how to actually use all this great information that you've so painstakingly brought to their attention. So Qlik Sense is the name of our platform. Qlik Sense comes in a couple different forms. It does come in a client managed version, which you would install and run yourselves. But the version that I'm going to show actually bits and pieces of both today, but primarily I'm going to concentrate on our SaaS solution, which is fully managed by Qlik. It's basically turnkey, no infrastructure to manage, very limited administration, and we handle things like auto scaling, making sure your performance is great. Really just a great offering. I mean, I've been in the industry for well over a decade here. I've installed a lot. I've struggled with a lot. And the SaaS product is really, the way of the future. If you're not a SaaS first company yet, you will be at some point. And I'm happy to report that Qlik has a fully featured SaaS offering that just keeps getting better and better. So besides the platform it runs on, what does Qlik Sense actually do? Well, we support a full range of use cases. So whether you are a business user who just wants to play around with a spreadsheet worth of data, or whether you're trying to stand up a guided analytics experience for an entire audience, we're going to handle that. And then the way that we do it is kind of special. Well, one of the ways we do it is kind of special. We have a lot of special things, but we have a lot of AI that is helping the user answer their questions. I'll put it pretty simply because you're going to see it in a demo. But our approach to analytics is not the typical approach, which I'll categorize as an IT developer has access to data. They develop some dashboards based on a number of requirements, and they push out a very static, very restricted user experience where somebody, if they have a question that's not answered by that dashboard, they have to circle back to that IT person, ask them for some more stuff, and it goes through that cycle again. And that cycle is a very long cycle in many cases. Where we try and change that game is we actually leverage AI to help people answer the questions that they need to get answered all by themselves. So it's a real game changer, the way that we're doing it, to make it as much as self-service as possible. So the three unique capabilities. So if you're going to ask the question about, well, okay, Qlik, this sounds all great. What makes you special? Well, this is what makes us special. So the number one in the green there is probably the biggest and yet hardest thing to understand about Qlik, because in many ways you really shouldn't have to understand it, but because of the way that most people are used to thinking about analytics, it is a little bit of a leap, and that's our associative difference. And what we mean by that is, the ability to explore in a very free-form fashion, to be able to see associations across your data. Um, it's all about getting rid of tunnel vision. I'm going to cover that. It's actually best seen rather than talked about. So I'm just going to leave it to that. But in the middle, our augmented analytics piece is that AI technology that I was just talking about. And then the last piece is about embedding. So this is an interesting one because in a traditional sense, people are forced to go to the analytics. So yeah, you go through painful motions to get that data, develop analytics, and you put it out there and you say, all right, I've built it, now they will come. And in a lot of cases, they don't come. Adoption rates, I think per Gartner, this is probably a few years old statistic, but I think they're around 30% for a typical analytics installation. And a lot of that is just because you can't force people to go there, and they find alternate ways to do their job, or they just do it without data. So where embedding at the point of decision becomes a primary game changer is it's all about taking bits and pieces of those analytics and putting them where people work. So like, for example, if you do the bulk of your work in Salesforce, say that's you're an analyst and you're working in Salesforce day in and day out, let's take bits and pieces of Qlik Analytics and embed them in Salesforce. So that's the idea. So that way people don't have to make a point to go to an analytics solution. They just have it right within the container they're already working in. So that's the great idea. So I think for time, I'm going to skip the last couple. I'm just going to get right to the demo. So hopefully you guys got a little bit of an idea of what you're going to see today. And let me pull out and do some demonstrations here. All right. So I'm going to start out here in our SaaS product. And what you're seeing here is what we call the hub. So the Qlik Sense Hub in our SaaS product is very configurable. And what you're seeing here is actually my customized version of my hub. I have many customization options for how I want to see. But key takeaways from here is I'm not only seeing a list of analytics that I have access to. In this case, I've created what's known as a collection of my favorite demonstration assets down here below for easy access. But I also have at the top a number of charts that are actually pulled from the apps that I have access to. And if I want to see all my charts, I can click View All. And that takes me to a customized page that I built myself from interesting bits and pieces of all the different analytics that I have access to. These charts are live. They refresh on data refresh. Whenever the data is reloaded, these actually will update. So as a user, I can actually see a broad range of analytics here on one page right inside my hub. And that's great because most times most users are only interested in one or two key metrics that they're concerned with on a daily basis. They check it, they see, is it good? Yes, go on to something else. If it's bad, well, then I might want to look into it further. And that's what this interface is all about. It's like trying to speed that transition to get the information and to take action if necessary. And if not, we move on to something else that's going to provide business value. So that's the chart section. More typically, though, what I might do is decide to analyze within a particular Qlik application, which would be a series of dashboards and data that I have access to do analytics. So I'm going to pick this one down here called Orders 360, and I'm going to open this guy up. So at this point, Qlik has loaded the analytics, and now we're able to peruse the different dashboards that are available for me to use. So all those different use cases I talked about. So this one's going to be more like a guided analytics use case. This is where a developer has gone in and created a series of dashboards. They've published it out for me to use. And the first one I'm going to click on is my associative difference dashboard. And I'm going to start out here because I mentioned that this is one of our biggest differentiators, and it's also one of the hardest to really grasp, but I'm going to take a shot at it. So one key idea behind Qlik that's not necessarily prevalent in other tools is the ability to see all your data, no matter what you filtered on. So here we are, we're in a Qlik Sense dashboard. We have all our data presented to us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing some analysis. So I'm going to put myself in the role. And by the way, this is an orders application. So it's called Orders 360. It's going to have order data. It's going to have some dimensional data about our customers, about our products, about our suppliers. So, and it's going to have a time grain, it goes over several years of sales are tracked in here. But just pretty typical application that you're going to see in nearly any company. So I'm going to put myself in the role of product manager for a particular product line. And what I'm looking for today in Qlik Sense is maybe my product line that I manage is the baby wear product line. So what I could do in Qlik Sense is I can click on baby wear, I can confirm that selection. And what happens there is we track that selection automatically up here in our selections bar. I can change that selection at any time. I can add to it. I can delete from it. But as we add selections, you're going to see we're going to build out a breadcrumb trail automatically up here at the top of Qlik Sense in order to give the user context as to what they're actually seeing. So you're not going to lose context when you're in Qlik Sense. You can always look at any element of data, any KPI, like the sales dollars KPI, and you'll know that, hey, 142,000, that happens to be the total sum sales where this category is equal to baby wear. So you can always get that context. But going back to the role that I'm putting myself in, I'm the product manager for baby wear, and maybe we have a product that's been underperforming. So perhaps I know that I have this shoe product here that's underperforming. I want to target customers who haven't bought this, because I want to actually I want to create a marketing campaign and get some additional marketing materials out to those customers who haven't bought that product. So what I can do is select that product. And now I see over here, I have my customer list. Now, if I scroll down far enough, something interesting happens. So I've got customers who are listed over here in white, and then it actually transitions to a gray color. And you're seeing that all over the place. You're seeing it as I made the selections, we have these various shades of gray are popping up all over the place. And the idea behind that is we're still showing you all information, all data. It's just that we're showing you what's in and out of your selection set by coloring it. So the rule here is anything in green is what I've selected. Anything in gray is what's now excluded based on my selections. And anything in white is what's still valid based on my selections. So put another way, with these two selections, I can look here in my customer list and I can say, okay, all these customers in white have purchased this particular product. That's what that means, because they're still valid. There's some association in the data. But even more interesting and sometimes even more useful is I see in gray all the customers who have never purchased this product. And that's actually what I'm looking for here today, is I'm not interested in reselling to the people who already bought it. Maybe I am, but in this case, I'm really trying to find that new business. So here's that list. It's all these customers in gray. So what I can do is, using the power of Qlik, I can come to my customer list. I can actually select all those customers in gray. And now I have those in my selection set. And now I can do something with them. I could export this list. I could push it down to our marketing department. Or I can dig into those customers' purchasing habits even further. It's endless what I can do in Qlik. And you see me as I'm transitioning between selections. It's seamless. It's very fast. So it's a great experience. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding of the power of the engine, which is really being able to see all the data and leverage data that typically would be hidden from you, like that list of gray customers. I probably wouldn't focus on them if I don't see them. And that's a lot of the power of the associative engine. So with that little lesson in mind, I'm going to just dive into some more feature function type pieces of Qlik. So here you'll see in front of you a dashboard, which is pretty typical, seeing some sales. And as you've seen me do before, I'm just going to do it here, but in different visualizations. I can make selections. So maybe I'm interested in, I'm the product manager again for baby wear, but for the country of Germany. And when I click Germany, we actually drill down. So we have drill down capabilities down to the city level now. Maybe I want to pull my baby wear product into the mix, click on baby wear. I can see all the different sub products. Maybe I want to filter for a particular time period. Maybe I only want to see the last year and a half or so. I can do that. So whatever my selections might be, I can do them fast, they get tracked. A common feature for filling the needs of many different stakeholders who have many different slices of data that they manage. Like in this case, I only care about Germany, baby wear, maybe a particular date range. I can come over here and create a bookmark. So I could actually create a bookmark, and I can say, this is my Germany baby wear bookmark. And now when I enter Qlik Sense, no matter where I am in the system, no matter what page, I can always trigger that particular bookmark, and it's going to take me right back to that spot. So, really nice feature for being able to create different bits of analyses that maybe I even want to come back to. One of the use cases I've always used this for is as I'm exploring in Qlik Sense, I'll come across many different insights that I'm not even out to find. And I'll say, uh-oh, I need to come back and look at that, create a bookmark, and I can come back to it later for further analysis. Say I want to share this. Here's another interesting use case for Qlik Sense is say I'm digging in, and maybe I'll dig in just a little bit further. Maybe I'll dig into a particular city, and now I'm looking at a particular customer. Maybe I want to share this margin percentage or this view of this dashboard, this analysis that I'm in progress. I found something insightful here, and I want to share it with, say, Brad. I can right click on any visualization in here. So maybe I'll right click the tree map here, and I have a share function. So rather than screenshot, rather than export the data, I can actually share right from within Qlik. So I can copy a link, and you guys are probably familiar with this concept. It's pretty prevalent in a lot of things today, but I can generate a clickable hyperlink that I can then copy, and then that's what I can paste in an email. That's what I can drop in a chat, in a Teams chat or a Slack chat. And when the person receives that, it's as simple as I'm clicking it, and we are going to take them right into Qlik Sense. We're going to put those selections up on the board again. We're going to show them the dashboard. We're even going to highlight the visualization temporarily that was used to generate that share link. And that's really just to call attention to whatever the point was. And now they're looking at exactly the same thing I was looking at. So there's no loss of translation here. And then usually, as is typical, you're sharing this insight. That person's going to have their own questions, their own analysis to do. They may want to drill in further, and they're more than happy to do that. That's the power of Qlik, being able to find the insights, share the insights, and also allow people to drill in further and answer their own questions. So a little bit on the selections here, one or two other things I want to point out. That set is going to follow you, whatever your selections are. They're going to follow you around the entire Qlik application. So if I come over here, you did see at the beginning, I have multiple sheets or dashboards, we call them sheets. I can actually transition to other sheets within the application, and that set is going to follow me. So what I just did here is I went from an aggregate dashboard. That sales dashboard is an aggregate view of my world. When I find something interesting in that dashboard, it's very common for people to want to see it in detail. And that's what this details dashboard is all about. So with one click, I was able to go from my sales dashboard over to my details dashboard. And now I can see the details. I'm seeing them in a tabular format. I can come down here and I can use things like a pivot table to look at my data however I want, whether I want to view it by product primarily or whether I want to switch it over to customer, or I want to, if I want to pick a particular set of products and do comparison, maybe I pull my product over here and I actually can see it, by comparison side by side. So however you want to work, we're going to allow you to do it. So a few other things here, more nuts and bolts features, but very, very useful. It's all about exploration. People often ask me, and I hear this a lot from customers who are coming to us due to limitations with competitor products. But one of the big ones that stands out is, how do I find something that's not on a dashboard? This is almost too common that you see dashboards that are built with tons and tons of filters, tons of selections. And you can do that in Qlik as well. You can see here we do have some of that hidden up here. We have some specific commonly used list boxes that people can pick from. But what happens if I'm looking at this dashboard and there's a particular element or filter that I want to apply that isn't on the dashboard? How do I do that? And Qlik has two solutions for that. The first one is called the selections tool. So I can come over here in the selections tool, open it up, and now I have my entire world of data, whatever's been loaded into this Qlik application, available for me to select and filter on. So for example, if I want to find a particular country, which we do have country on this dashboard, but just to illustrate an alternate way to find that, I can search for country and I can filter by a particular country just by clicking on it. Something we don't have on this dashboard is employee. So maybe I want to see what the sales are for a particular employee. So I can search for my employee dimension. I can pick a particular employee or employees. And when I close my selection set, of course, I pick one that has no sales. So let's see if Bill has some sales. And Bill has no sales either. Kind of striking out on this one, but let me, all right, good enough. The idea here is I can pick through and I can filter on anything. So in this case, believe it or not, this is filtered by this particular employee. They just happen to have no sales. So that's the idea. I can do it right through the selections tool. I can come back in and just grab a whole bunch of employees. Maybe we'll get a hit. And still we don't. I'll have to check on that. But that's the idea, is I can filter on anything. Another different way that I can do it is by using our search, smart search. So the idea behind smart search is now, instead of having to pick it from a list or having to click on it in a dashboard and have it built into a dashboard, I can just come in and search for it. So I've used the role of baby wear in Germany product manager. So let's just start typing Germany and let's type in baby wear. And when I start typing that, Qlik gives us selections or suggested selections based on what we typed. So I can see, it came up and it said, hey, I have a country of Germany. I have a category of baby wear. Is that what you're looking for? And you know what, in this case, it is. I can click on that. And just like you've seen before, it's as if I made those two selections on the dashboard. And that could be anything again, so like going back to the employee analogy here, and what was his name? Bill Yang. We'll look for Bill. There's Bill right there. Same idea as if I had selected that from within the selections tool. So if you can teach somebody to use the selections tool and to use the smart search, they can filter on anything in Qlik, which is pretty amazing when you think about having that whole world of data open to you for analysis. It's not restricted to what a developer's design was. Okay, so a few other things. Let's talk about those charts, all those things that I monitored in my hub. So we started out by saying, here you have the ability to put what's relevant to you, right, in a quick find situation. So I'll just do a couple selections. Maybe we'll go with women's wear and Germany. So maybe I'm branching out. I'm looking into different product lines. And this is interesting. I want to keep an eye on this particular product profitability map. This is what's relevant to me because I'm razor focused on the margin percent KPI. That's what I'm using to primarily gauge my business. So what I can do is, rather than force myself to have to go into this app every single day, I can right click on this product profitability tree map. I can say monitor and hub. And if I click that, it gives me a preview. It lets me rename it, tell me where I want to put it. But to keep it easy, I'm just going to hit monitor. And here it tells us this chart's been added to the hub. And now if I hit open, it's going to take me back to the hub. And now you're going to see I'm on my list of charts, but now that new product profitability chart has been added to my monitoring. So now every day when I wake up and come into Qlik, I'll see that particular chart here in my list. I don't have to go in there. I also see it next to all the other charts. So I've just expanded, very quickly and easily expanded the world of what I have access to. If I want to view this in detail, I can hit view, and we're just going to load it up, give you a little bit bigger version of it. I can actually see over here what selections were applied to this chart. And in typical Qlik fashion, if I really want to see, this chart in detail, I can just click view an app and it's going to take me right out to it. It's going to put those selections back on like you've seen before, and I can ask follow-up questions. So nice little usability feature there. Going back to my home, I want to talk about another use case that is very common that we cover, which is, how do I draw people back in? So up to now, we've been focusing on a case where somebody has to go into the analytics. I talked about this a little bit with the embedded pieces. We know we have a 30% industry-wide adoption rate. How do I get people to use analytics more? Is the only way to get them to use it to force them to come in? Well, no, that's not true. With Qlik, you can use alerting capabilities to send them a data-driven alert in order to draw them back into the system when needed. So I have here a very simple, again, a sales-focused application. This is my sales rep performance. So pretty typical. I've got a list of sales reps. They have different regions. They have different metrics that we're measuring them on. So my role here in this one is I happen to be the regional manager for the Asia Pacific region. I'm razor focused on this percent to target because I know that we're coming up to quarter end, and I want to make sure that we're going to hit our target. We're only at 86%, so I'm concerned about that going down. I want to be notified immediately if we get new data, new sales data tomorrow, and that percent to target's going down and not up. So that's what I'm worried about. So I can actually come in and I can create an alert for this. So if I do create alert, I'm now able to give it a name. And I'm going to say APAC performance. And I can choose a measure. So it all comes down to a measure. So I'm going to pick that percent to target measure. And that's the one I'm going to focus on. And Qlik tells me, yep, it's currently 86.49%. I'm going to go forward. And I gotta give it a condition. So when I pick that measure, I have a choice of different types of conditions. So in this case, I want to know when it falls below a certain threshold, and I can compare it to a distinct value, which is what I'm going to do here today. But I could also compare it to another measure. So we have that ability to compare measure to measure. So if you have other calculated measures you want to compare against, that's certainly in scope. But I'm just going to say I want to compare it to a value. I want to know when it goes below, we'll say 85%. And that's all I really need to do. And I choose my distribution schedule. Do I want to be notified every single time that the data is updated? Or do I only want to be bothered once per hour, once per day? So we'll just say once per day. So every day, we may reload the data for this application every hour, but I really only want to know once per day what my target looks like, because I'm going to be taking action during the rest of the day if it's not where I want it to be. So I can create that alert, and that alert's created. And we self-manage. One of the big things about the SaaS platform is it's so much about self-management. It's about delegating and allowing people to manage their own lives. So your alerts are yours that you can set yourself. And you can see here I have two different alerts. I've just created the one called APAC performance, but I actually have a very similar alert here that I've already created called APAC greater than 85%. And just for sake of time, I want to show you what that looks like if that actually fired, which would be, let me go back to the hub here. Let me go back to it here, because we have a mailbox or a notification center right within SaaS. And you can see here, this is what it actually looks like when an alert gets triggered. So the alert is going to evaluate on reload. If it's successful, it triggers. It will send to this mailbox. It'll also send to email. So if I get this in an email, it's going to be a similar approach. But what's important is I'm always going to get this view an app link, which even if it's in an email, it's going to trail me back. You've seen this multiple times now. It's a very common theme. Let's get back into Qlik. Let's put your selections up there. Let's show you, what is that thing that caused the alert, so that now I can take action. So that's part of that, part of being able to drive adoption, bring people back into the platform where they can become aware, take action. Okay, so there's much more, but I want to talk a little bit. I want to save the last few minutes just to talk about big data use cases, because that was one of the themes here. But to sum up what you've seen here, key takeaways, everything you've been seeing, all this lightning fast performance is being driven by that associative engine. Qlik is meant to be fully visible. There's no tunnel vision. We show you all your data. We make it easy for the user to create a customized experience, pick the things that are relevant to them, make it as easy as possible to get in there. And then the alerting is another way to draw you back in. And that's an important concept, is changing the way that people access analytics. So I'm going to go away from this for a moment. I'm going to go to log this in, and I'm just going to pop the PowerPoint presentation back on. There you go. So the two utilities here. So, Qlik, one of the things I didn't mention about that associative engine is the reason it's so great. The reason we can do what we were doing there with all those associations is it's a custom built engine. It's originated in 1993 with our QlikView product, and we've been refining it ever since. So it's got a massive history. It's immensely powerful, and it's in memory. So it runs in the memory space of the server, and that's how we provide such fast and fantastic performance. So that's this first one right here. So that's our typical case. So typically in Qlik, users gonna interact in an app that's been loaded into memory, and that's the experience that they're going to get. Now, where does that become a limiting factor? If you have very, very large scale data, so billions upon billions upon billions of records, you will hit an upper bound where sometimes it's not feasible to load all those records into that memory space. So that's where we need to get fancy. We need to think a little bit about the use case, about how can we still leverage that great in-memory technology and yet allow us to work with our large data store, our billions and billions and billions of records. So that's where we come up with these two patterns, I'll call them, one of which is called on-demand app generation, and one is called dynamic views. And under the covers, they're quite similar. Now, what's different about them is in the on-demand app generation case, you're creating separate apps for analysis versus in dynamic views, you're actually staying within one app. So go back to something I said really early on about the guided analytics experience versus maybe like the self-service freeform experience. I'd say your dynamic views is going to be very much a guided experience, and that's where it makes sense. Whereas something like an on-demand app generation enables users to have a more self-service experience with big data behind it. So the concept in a nutshell is you create a Qlik Sense application, which is going to define the scope of what people can access in your big data store. So this is important because one of the biggest problems with databases and large data stores is the amazingly simple way to overload them and kill their performance. And that's due to lack of governance and the ability for people to, well, most times lack of governance, for people to restrict users from writing queries that are particularly large or complex that are going to overload the data store. So that's where we come in with the idea in Qlik of governing all that. So think of Qlik as an interface in this use case where we're going to put some throttles and some controls on what we're going to allow the user to pull out of that big data store and actually bring into Qlik. So the that initial selection app is where you're going to make the selections. It's like picking from a menu. Those selections are then passed down to a second app called a template app, which then gets loaded based on the selections that the user made right from the data source. So typically Qlik is a load and go technology. You load on some interval. In this scenario, you're actually going to allow the user to pull back on an as needed or a real-time basis. So once those are loaded, in the case of on-demand app generation, a new app is created, a completely new app, and the user's given that application to do what they will with it. They can extend it, they can slice and dice it, they can schedule it for additional reloads. They have a lot of flexibility there to work with that app. The alternative is if you use a dynamic view approach, the output of that application is actually not a persisted separate app. It's what we call a session app, means it just exists temporarily in memory, and the contents of it are injected back into the initial application, the selection app. So I know this is wordy, probably easier to just look at it. So let me just keep forwarding forward. So a couple things of note about costs. So one of the big things that I loved about Qlik when I was looking for a solution in industry, which is how I found it and eventually came to work for the company, is how can I get away from worrying about cost of database platforms, because database platforms are great, they can scale, but in a lot of cases, at least in my case, we had invested great sums of money in ever faster databases. And what we found is with Qlik, an in-memory approach is very efficient. very cost effective because memory and in-memory technology is just inherently faster than disk-based technology. So from a cost perspective, keeping things in memory is actually very, very low cost. You can do a lot with a little. Where you start to track outward, if you need to introduce something like an ODAG or a dynamic view, typically what you're doing now is you're pushing some of the cost out into compute cost of your database. So every time you're doing something like an ODAG analysis app's getting created, you're going to pay, typically in today's world, you're going to pay for the queries that need to be executed, the compute time to load those apps on demand. Same thing with dynamic views, because a dynamic view is actually meant to be like a real-time refreshable window in Qlik. So you can imagine users might sit there and just keep pressing refresh every minute. So you're going to see those costs go up. So just be aware. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here. There's a reason why we have these cases available, why we have these patterns and these technologies. But just what we've seen is if you're trying to keep your costs low, and it's something that Qlik does excellently, our total cost of ownership is probably the best in the business. Your in memory space is where you want to strive to be. And then if you need to step out of that, you do have ODAG, you do have dynamic views, but just be aware that now you may increase your costs based on just the way that they work. So I'm going to skip over the use case thing just for sake of time and go to this slide, which is what are the three main things that you're going to use on-demand app generation dynamic views for. The one at the bottom there in the gray, jump to details. I think this is the most common. So it's when I want to pick a slice of information, like we talked about Germany and baby wear. Imagine I have such a large database. I have 10 billion records, and I need to view that slice. I need to look at my piece of the world, Germany, baby wear. I can actually pick those and real-time query and jump to the details for it, assuming all this doesn't fit in an in-memory app. Another one is if I want to do like a query interface, if I actually want to initiate a query and just bring back the data so somebody can take that data and do something else with it, that's very common as well. And then the last one, the metadata interface is that ODAG scenario where I might have a reason why I want people to be able to generate their own apps, but with a predefined set of data. So I might want to make it so that they can use a template interface to generate an analysis app that then they own. And there's many reasons why I might do that. So let's take the last few minutes and let's just demo a few of these things. You can see them in action. And here I am. I'm just going to start out in now I'm on this isn't our SaaS platform. This is our client managed platform. So it looks slightly different. But the one I'm going to start out with is my New York taxi analysis. And actually, I'm going to pick a different one. So we're going to pull the updated version of it. This one's interesting because it's built on a set of data that is publicly available. So if you search for New York City taxi data, you will find the web page where you can download and get this data set. This data set, if you assemble all the individual Excel files together, adds up to 1.3 billion records. So right now, my taxi data is 1.3 billion records. This is sitting in Google BigQuery. So that's the database that we have this staged in. And Google BigQuery, you do pay by query. So that's part of that cost that I was talking about. So every time I go to initiate a query, it's going to cost me some amount of money. So just for reference. But what's interesting here is if you dig into this set, there's this main outlier here. So I'm looking, we've graphed up average fare amount versus number of fares. And you see a typical spread here where the average fare amount is below $200, but we have this one main outlier here where it's sticking up. It's around $800 average fare. So for my analysis, I'm going to highlight that particular element. Actually, I need to click it properly and grab it. There we go. So I've now done a selection in Qlik around that particular outlier. And now this is very typical, and this is why this pattern works so well, is I just with one selection went from 1.4 billion rows of data, which are in scope. They're not in this app, but they're in scope. The idea is I can select from them. I went down to 432,000 records. So that's why this pattern works so well, because nobody is usually consuming all 1.4 billion or 10 billion. There's some slice of that data that they're interested in. So I've done that selection. And you know what? I think based on payment types, what we're talking about here is an average fare amount being through the roof around 800. So I'm thinking if you were to get a fare of that much, you're probably not going to pay for it. You're probably going to dispute it, or it's going to be one of these three buckets here. So I'm just kind of guessing. I'm doing an ad hoc analysis. So I've made those two selections, and now I'm down to 1,541 fares that actually fall into those criteria. Now, the way that the ODAG interface works is down here, we have this link. And what this link is going to let me do is it's going to let me view what are the constraints on what I've selected that are going to allow me to generate that app for analysis. And that's what this is all about. I mentioned that we do allow you to do this in a governed way. Well, this is part of that governance. So you're using Qlik now to constrain your user to only get the data that you're allowing them to select. You're going to limit it. We're making them pick from this menu of selections until they get down to below 50,000 records. I'm not going to be spending a ton on big queries because they're going to execute fast, because I'm not going to let my users bring in the whole world. That's the idea here. So once I've met my conditions and my criteria, whatever they are, I can click Generate New App. And what that's going to do is that's going to launch a process. And what's actually happening right now is Qlik is using that template app that I showed you on the screen. It's fetching out the BigQuery with a specific query, which says, hey, go get me the fares, these 1,541 fares. It's dynamically generating that SQL statement. It's pulling it back, and it's already done. So it's already queried that 1.3 billion record set. It's gotten the new data. It's created an app for me to use, and it's given me a link right here to go ahead and open that application so I can explore those 1,541 records, those fares, in greater detail. And as you'll see here, I've popped that open. I have 1,541 fares here. And now this is pretty typical. What you'll see is as you get deeper and deeper into a data set, you can afford to get richer and richer with the amount of information that you provide. So this is just a game of numbers. It's a performance game. Qlik is great in performance, but like I said, everything has its limits. So if we bring down the amount of data that we have, we can put it in memory, and now we can also make it richer. So we can bring in, we can graph it, we can chart it. So here we see, the heat map of all the different drop-off locations, and I have details around the fares. And if I focus on my total amount, I actually see here that I have a fare on this date, and apparently somebody took a trip for 169 days. They went 288,000 miles, and it cost them $61,000. This is actual data point in this data. We didn't make this one up. So it's obviously a bad data situation, but you can imagine if you're doing this type of analysis, you probably want to drill a little bit further, and we can certainly do that. And just like I did with the initial ODAG selection to create this app, I can go multiple layers deep. So now with a selection here, I actually have ODAG within ODAG, where I'm able to create and generate yet another level of detail, further enriching, bringing in more and more levels of detail through this process, so that once this is done, I can open it up. And now we get down to probably what I'd say is the lowest level of granularity about this particular trip, all the way to the point where now we've actually graphed the route that was taken by the taxi driver. And we see some of the other details as well about this particular route. And I always like to say when I do this one that my theory is whoever was doing this really liked the view from this bridge, because they drove across it 169 days straight. So that's ODAG. Okay, so let's go back, and I want to show you the other spin on this, which is dynamic views and where that fits in. So in the ODAG approach, you saw me, I created, I was creating separate apps, and we did that by making selections, but it always produced a separate app. Well, what if my users don't need that? What if what I really want is a little window in my Qlik application, which is primarily an in-memory application. Maybe they're doing 90+% of what they need using in-memory resources, but there's something out there that they need immediate. Maybe they want to refresh the screen and see if any orders came in for a customer within the last hour. Or maybe they want to see if there's any support tickets or any updates, whatever it might be. That's where something like dynamic views makes a lot of sense. And the way that dynamic views works is, again, throttles governance. These are dynamic views, they're just visualizations. But what you're seeing here is we put a message up here which says your current selections exceed the constraints set for this view. What that means in layman's terms is you got to make some selections to get it down to a reasonable number, just like we did with the ODAG approach. So if I come up here, maybe I pick, a particular range of dates. Maybe I pick it for a particular company, whatever it might be. And now what I actually see is I have the ability, once I've met my constraints, again, very similar to ODAG, I can now say refresh. And what's actually happening now is we're pushing the queries for these selections, pushing them down. But when we get the information back, we're going to populate it right within this application itself. So there you go, that's done. So now, we're not in a separate application. We don't have to bounce open another application. We're just working right within Qlik. And what's great about this is as I'm making selections, this is an in-memory world. I'm now leveraging the best parts of Qlik. I'm not restricted and having to push a new query down every time I'm making a selection. I'm actually working within the in-memory model of Qlik, which has all that great associative experience, the speed, everything comes along with it. So that's dynamic views in a nutshell. And since I have 2 minutes left, and then we'll just do a very brief Q&A, I will show you the last case that I talked about, which was the query case, which, let me just bring this up here. Another common one where, in this case, we're hitting SAP. We have a number of queries that we've defined, which are usable. So maybe I will go in and I am going to pick, let's look for, I think we have one here called equipment. There you go. So I'm just going to pick this particular query. It's going to let me pick any number of dimensions that I want. Let me pick a measure to go along with it. And I can actually now refresh my dynamic view, just like you've seen me do before. And what I'm going to get in this case is just a table of data. There's a common use case as well, where somebody says, hey, I need a dynamic interface. I need a way to just pull out the data and look at the raw data. Maybe I want to come here, and after it's come back, maybe I want to go ahead and do an export. And I can do that. I can just export the data from here and take it on my way. So that's what I had for today, guys. I hope that wasn't too much too fast, but to summarize it all up, you're talking about a very dynamic environment, and we can work with all use cases, including big data. So I'm happy to take questions if anybody has them.
Thanks for that. One of the things I was wondering about was, how are you guys thinking about incorporation of machine learning models and more predictive analytics as opposed to things that have already transpired?
So as far as predictive goes, we actually can integrate today on our client managed platform with engines like R and Python.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go that route, we can interface with your existing models. Now, something that I didn't, just for sake of time, I didn't get into, there is that AI interface that I was talking about. Let me find, I think I can show this probably in 10 seconds, probably more like a minute. And since it looks like we have fairly limited audience still, I think we'll be okay. We have something called the Insight Advisor. So is another way that people can use Qlik Sense. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just in that app, that same sales app. You've been seeing me, we've been picking through it, answering questions in that guided way. What if I have some other questions I want to ask? So, here I am. I can ask a question. I can say something like, what are my sales of baby wear in Germany? And what Qlik is going to do is it's going to translate that particular statement. It's going to come up with an interpretation for it, and then it's going to come up with a whole bunch of different visualizations. You can see how we interpreted it. You can see the different visualizations that have been now created based on that question. And some of what's in here gets really interesting. Like if I add, say, in 2017, we'll start to get things like control charts, because now we're talking about a date range. So it's not exactly predictive. Some of the charts are going to show you some interesting insights. But this is another way that you can go in and you can leverage free form, you can ask questions. If you want to integrate your own predictive, we do have R and Python integration. And then the third way that I've seen people can do predictive is to just build Qlik Sense dashboards that allow you to adjust parameters. So, there's a way I can create models in there where I can say, I want to put a slider on the screen, and I want to model what happens if I change the, the base price of this product by 10%, and I can change that. And you can actually, I consider that to be predictive modeling, where you can actually see what is going to be the change in my business if I do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, all right, looks like we're down to any other questions, David? I think you're the lone holdout here.
No, that's what I wanted to see the latest update, and I wanted to just ask that question. I'm good.
Okay. So I think we're done then. So I don't know, Monica or Brad, or if you guys had any